in terms of sexual explicitness for most of the movie, it's like, all right, everyone's clothed and it's watchable.
Yeah, totally. They might be on fire or, like decapitated or bathing in blood, but when she's bathing in blood, she is actually fully nude. Hello, and welcome to Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Podcast. We're your hosts, Matt Levine
and Vincent Hannum,
and we're talking about all our favorite monster movies, the good, the bad, and the downright campy, and asking if they stand the test of time.
Traditional kaiju creature features, space invaders, and the supernatural, and everything in between. All strange beasts are welcome here.
Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information.
And this is what the devil does. To beget his evil, he obtains help from our virtues. Even if the gain be small, his harvest is great. But God, in his infinite wisdom, understands the wiles of the devil. And so, he gives us the strength to face them with noble thoughts and prayer. In this way, Justine, Alucarda, I trust that you have been listening.
Yes, sister.
Then you can repeat what I've just read. Well, Alucarda, stand up, child.
And this is what the devil does. He grants us virtues to expand his kingdom, the only valid one.
God, with his lack of knowledge, does not understand this truth and opposes it with false thoughts and prayers.
God, silence!
Satan, 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 our Lord and Master, I acknowledge...
Don't listen to them!
Satan,
Don't listen to them!
our Lord and Master.
Vincent, good to see you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm well, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Tonight, I'm very excited here on the podcast on Camp Kaiju. We're going to talk about a classic of Mexican horror cinema called Alucarda from 1977.
Indeed. This movie is in the demonic possession genre, which we have not really talked about on this show. You know, thinking about your Exorcists, I don't know. It's honestly not a genre I'm well educated in. I've seen The Exorcist, and maybe that is a disservice to other films of its ilk, because I've started with the best. Not to foreshadow my conclusions about Alucarda, but it is a genre that I'm coming into it a bit of a newbie.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I usually am kind of like affected by movies about the devil or like Satan. I don't know why that is exactly, because I'm not especially religious. I was not raised religious by my parents, but like the concept of Satan and like being possessed and like where evil comes from, if it's from this sort of like outside force or whatever, I do like that theme. But you're right that we haven't really talked about it a lot on Camp Kaiju. It's, we were just talking about this. Is Satan a monster? Is this a monster movie? It's kind of right on the edge, but it's sort of in our strange beast umbrella. So it counts.
Everything in between, and I'll echo you, Matt. I would consider myself more religious, just for what it's worth. But regardless, I am also. If there's one monster movie genre that actually gets under my skin, it is usually satanic possession devil movies. So, I'm out of my comfort zone here, and I think that's a good thing, ultimately.
Yeah. I feel like I am too. I'm also not really very familiar with Mexican cinema in general. Sorry to say that. It's kind of a blind spot for me, and I'm hoping to rectify that. But yeah, so, I'm kind of like coming into this as kind of a newbie as well, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching the Friday the 13th movies.
I know.
Yeah, you've been keeping up on my Letterboxd reviews. I figured I should like do that series, like, do it some due diligence or whatever, because I've never seen all of them. So I'm 4 movies in. Generally, I don't like them very much. Nightmare on Elm Street is definitely my slasher franchise that I love. Halloween is okay. Friday the 13th has its, like, campy thrills that are kind of fun every once in a while, but I'm hoping they get better and more ridiculous as they go on.
So you've seen 1 through 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
4 is generally regarded as the best of the franchise.
Huh.
The low bar, but
Yeah. I've read that too, and it does seem like a low bar. I like the makeup and gore effects are really great, and the ending is very strong in the fourth one.
yeah.
Some of the stuff leading up to that, I mean, just like the characters are so redundant. It's like the same horny teenagers over and over again. I know that's what you get with the slasher movie. I know that, but like, I don't know. I'm just surprised how boring they are. Like half of those movies are like people stumbling around in dark rooms, But like I said, there's some good stuff about them. I thought number 3 was pretty fun, like all the sort of like 3D effects, even if you're not watching them in 3D. That was pretty entertaining.
And he gets his mask in 3. What kept me going, because I agree 100% with everything you've just said. And so I was like, what keeps me going when I watched number 1? It's a sense of continuity. Like Jason does have a through line from the first film through the 8th or 9th film. Through the 8th film. That's all one story arc for Jason Voorhees. And I love stuff like that. Even if it's as bad as the series is, it keeps you on a cliffhanger.
I love that. Yeah, I do. I agree with that. It's cool to see Jason's first appearance in the second movie, and then, like you said, the hockey mask in the third one. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep going. I hope like the more ridiculous they get when he's like in Manhattan and in outer space, I might start liking them more the campier they get. So we'll see what happens.
I won't spoil it, but there is one film in the series where the tone decidedly shifts to camp, and at that point, you're off to the races.
Cool. Okay, I can't wait. I'm gonna keep on going with them.
Yeah. All right. Keep you posted.
Yeah, for sure.
Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. This past February, and we have another one coming up in March.
Oh, cool. And I think this episode, it's coming out on the 14th, so one day after that.
Yeah. All right.
If we stick with that schedule. What about you? Have you seen any good monster movies recently?
Yes, I've been doing some blaxploitation exploration. One film called Abby, which is about a woman being possessed by the devil. So I'll bring that one up later in our chat here. But I also watched a movie called Sugar Hill from 1974. It's a mob revenge story with zombies, voodoo. It's every exploitative genre thrown into it, but it's fun for what it's worth.
I've always wanted to see Sugar Hill. I've never gotten around to it. I think it had a theatrical screening around here recently. I can't remember where exactly.
Yeah, the Imagine Theater, I think.
Nice. I did want to shout out a couple movies that are showing in late March here in Minneapolis for any of our listeners that are in Minneapolis. And this is kind of a conflict of interest, I'll admit, because I'm a volunteer at the Trilon Cinema. But the weekend of March 13th through 15th, Alien, maybe the best monster movie of all time, is playing in 35mm at the Trilon. If you're in Minneapolis, check that out. And then later in March, They Live, the John Carpenter classic, is playing as well. So it's a good month for monster movies. All right. Thank you again for hanging out with us, friends. Please rate and review Camp Kaiju. Follow us on patreon.com/Camp Kaiju for additional videos, reviews, merchandise, and more. Other ways you can get in touch are via email, campkaiju@gmail.com, at our website, which is campkaijupodcast.com, on Instagram, or our voicemail number, which is 612-470-2612. As always, we want to shout out our current Patreon members. Thank you so much to Jason, Chris, Sean, Peggy, Don, Steffi, Jim Cheney, and our anonymous patron. We really appreciate you.
What a list.
Yeah, it's growing. It's so good to see.
Yeah. We'll get to Mina's mailbox, but we're loving all the comments and the conversation that's happening around a lot of these movies and your interests, and it's been really great interacting with you all.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure. And if you've seen Alucarda, let us know what you think. It definitely makes an impression. If you haven't seen it and you are a little bit adventurous in your movie going, please check it out. Let us know what you think.
I love that. be adventurous.
Yeah, I mean, nothing better than like just a one of a kind movie, pushing your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple standout horror movies or monster movies from movie history in mid-March. It turns out this is kind of a good time of the year for horror movies. There are a lot of good movies on this list that have come out throughout history right around this time in mid-March. Any of those movies jump out at you, Vincent?
Forbidden Planet from 1956. It is a landmark science fiction film of the 50s that influenced, for example, George Lucas when he was creating a Star Wars universe. I mean, this is a Technicolor movie ensemble based on Shakespeare's The Tempest. So it's smart, but visually stylish, as you would say, Matt. And it's a classic. Haven't talked about it yet on this podcast. I do have some quibbles with it, but one day it may come up in the podcast. We could dive into it then. But I'll just leave it there. Forbidden Planet. Check it out if you haven't.
I love that movie. I agree with you there. Yeah, so stylish. Like you said, Vincent, and just like there's a lot to that movie. I love campy, fun sci-fi movies, but it's more than just that in this case. So that's a good choice. Love that one. There are a couple Brian De Palma movies on this list, which are not actually totally monster movies. The one that I'm going to shout out is The Fury from 1978. That's a relatively early Brian De Palma movie, maybe about a decade into his career. He made that shortly after Carrie. The Fury kind of has some similar themes. It's like telekinesis and like secret government programs, which is not like Carrie, but a new kind of wrinkle to the story. And it's just so, not to use the phrase that you just said, Vincent, but so visually stylish. It's like the most stylish movie ever made. And like one of the late scenes in the movie, it features a very well-known actor getting blown up and his head like flying at the camera at the audience. I don't want to give away too much, but check out The Fury if you haven't before. I love Brian De Palma, and that's one of his most ridiculously extravagant movies. It's so fun.
I'm a sucker for two things in my horror movies or movies in general. One is when somebody loses a head. And two, when somebody is on fire.
Yeah.
So The Fury, you had me at the flying head, and people on fire happens in Alucarda.
Yeah, and somebody loses a head too.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. It's like a corpse that maybe is alive or like an undead corpse, maybe. It's hard to know exactly what's going on, but somebody loses a head for sure.
Oh, what's wrong with me? But you're right.
I mean, there's so much in Alucarda. Like a violent horror trope, there's like a 75% chance it's in this movie, Might be a little high, but there's so much to it. I love it.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
There are some good movies coming up or recently released that are sort of monster movie adjacent. I don't really know what to think about The Bride, which stars Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley. I love both of them. Directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. It looks like kind of a cool sort of like crime movie update of Bride of Frankenstein. So I don't know what to expect, but really excited for that one.
The blending of genres intrigues me. Classic sci-fi Frankenstein with a 1920s gangster. I mean, that should be a winning combination. I don't know why I'm so skeptical, but I'm here for it. I will support any monster movie. Yeah. What are these other ones? Undertone and Alpha. I am unfamiliar.
Yeah, Undertone, I don't think that's so much a monster movie, but it's kind of like it's a horror movie about, I think it's a podcast recorder. So, close to our line of work. And it's like some kind of ghostly presence comes out of like some kind of recording and torments this podcast host. I don't really know a lot about it. It might be a Blumhouse production, whatever that tells you, but it looks kind of cool. The trailer's pretty good.
All right.
The one that I'm probably more excited about coming out in late March is called Alpha. It's directed by the French director Julia Ducournau. I really like her movies a lot. She made Raw and then Titan a little bit more recently. Speaking of like extreme movies, which we'll be talking about with Alucarda tonight, Ducournau's movies are very extreme, like very intense, graphically violent. Raw is kind of about cannibalism. Tatan is indescribable and is like very, very. Yeah, I can't describe it. It's indescribable. But I love her movies, and Alpha sounds like very divisive, but I'm really looking forward to that one.
Words we've mentioned in this podcast already, or like about decapitation, cannibalism, undescribable, which is very, leaves that to your imagination. It's gonna be a good one. Good one
Yeah,
tonight.
exactly. Yeah, this ain't a PG episode. It's PG-13. Parents strongly cautioned.
Yeah. And I'll just mention the Sam Raimi movie called Send Help that came out last month. Came out of nowhere for me. It wasn't on my radar, but it's gotten really great reviews, strong box office, word of mouth. And it's Sam Raimi. It looks like he's at the top of his game. It's like a survival horror movie. I don't know if there's a monster in it, but it looks very bloody. And it stars Rachel McAdams. And it looks cool. Like I want to see it.
Yeah, I did see it. I liked it quite a bit. Yeah, there's not really a monster, but it's one of those movies where it's like the monster is man, you know what I mean? To be a little bit corny and on the nose about it. But it's a very fun movie. It is very bloody. I always love Sam Raimi most of the time. So yeah, highly recommend it.
Yes. Let's not talk about Drag Me to Hell, but let's just say Drag Me to Hell is a movie I've only seen once, and it still remains one of my favorite horror movies.
It's so fun. Yeah, and one of my favorite endings ever in that movie.
Don't tell me, I can't even remember. I saw it in the theater, and it's just that movie's just always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's great, and you should rewatch it and then tell me what you think of the ending because it's so good.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming up on Camp Kaiju, we got some good stuff. Do you want to talk about your next pick, Vincent?
Yes, Troll Hunter from Norway, circa 2013. It's a Norwegian kaiju movie. These trolls are kaiju sized, and it's set in the modern day. It's about a team of troll hunters, a scientist research team, and they're tracking trolls throughout the Norwegian countryside of the mountains. Obviously chaos and terror ensues, but it's just like a great reimagining of classic troll lore. And it's a Norwegian film, so get ready to read some subtitles, but it's a really fun time. Another movie I've only seen once, but it's always stuck with me.
Awesome. I've never seen that. I've always wanted to. Thank you for giving me the excuse to do so. I'm looking forward to that movie. And then the episode after that, my next choice will be At Midnight, I'll Take Your Soul, which is a Brazilian movie from the late 60s. I did see it once back in college. I don't really remember it very well. I do remember that it was the introduction of a character named Coffin Joe, who would be kind of a recurring character in Brazilian horror movies for a long time after that. So it's kind of vampire-based, kind of like, undead, zombie-ish a little bit. That'll be a fun episode, and Frank Olson will be joining us for that one. So all you Frankaholics have that to look forward to.
Heck yeah. And I just want to point out, maybe our Olympic theme we did not plan, but our international picks are on the money here. We started the season with a Japanese film, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The Abominable Snowman was a British film, Blackula American, Alucarda Mexican, then a Norwegian, and then a Portuguese film.
Yeah. It's like cool. A Brazilian film, yeah.
Brazilian.
But Portuguese language, yeah. So we're touring the world. I love it.
That's so cool.
Weirdly enough, Alucarda is in English, and they shot it in English. So even though it was filmed in Mexico, it's an English language movie.
Really? Because
Yeah.
it sounded and seemed like the actors were dubbed.
I think the actors were post-dubbed, but were also speaking English while they shot the movie because it has an international cast, and all the actors spoke English. And there are some possible reasons for that, which we'll get into a little bit later in the episode. But yeah, they intended it to be English language the entire time.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you
Just one of many ways this is a very strange movie.
Yeah.
On that note, what is your personal history with Alucarda?
None. I feel like I say that all the time now, which is a great thing. You mentioned it. I thought it was a vampire film. I was wrong about that. I rented it on Amazon Prime, and at first I was confused because the title that comes up on Prime is Sisters of Satan.
Yeah.
So I had to, which is, I guess, the U.S. release title.
Yeah, so it didn't really get a theatrical release in the United States, but then it did kind of gain a cult following on VHS when it came out in the 80s. And it actually went by several different titles in the United States on videotape. Sisters of Satan was one of them. We'll go into some of the other titles a little bit later on. So I think it was an example of like various companies had the distribution rights, so they could just like title it whatever they wanted, basically.
I will say, like, just from like a marketing standpoint, Sisters of Satan would probably sell better than Alucarda. Because, like, what is that? You don't really know what that is. But Sisters of Satan, now you have my attention.
Yeah, it's a pretty good title. I'll just say right now that the other titles that this movie was known by on VHS in the United States were Mark of the Devil 3, also not a bad title, and Innocents from Hell, which is a great exploitation title as well. So arguably, those three titles might be a little catchier than Alucarda, you know?
Arguably. All right. Well, what was the one with the 3 in it?
What was that? Mark of the Devil 3.
As in the third movie in a series?
Oh, well, that's a good point. I thought maybe, like, does it mean, like, Justine, Alucarda, and Satan? Like a triumvirate? That was my guess. I don't know.
Like, yeah. Of the Devil 3.
Exactly, yeah. But who knows? Yeah, I'm not really sure. I kind of like it, though. I like that name.
Yeah. I like Alucarda, too. I think I liked it better when I thought it was Dracula spelled backwards.
Same. Yeah. I mean, I'll share my personal history with the film. I also didn't really know anything about this. I knew I wanted to bring a Mexican movie to the podcast because we've talked about Guillermo del Toro a little bit, but like, I don't think we talked about Cronos, which I think is his only Mexican movie. The Devil's Backbone is a Spanish movie. So, you know, we haven't really talked about very many Mexican movies.
We talked about, one about the sex alien octopus creature.
Yeah, you're right. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that. The Untamed, which is a movie I like quite a bit. That's pretty extreme too.
That was like 5 years ago we talked about that.
Yeah, man.
4 or 5 years ago.
Back to the beginning. Yeah, pretty much. Beginning of our time together anyway. But no, good point. That might be the only other Mexican movie we've talked about. But then I did some research. Alucarda is on a lot of lists of the best Mexican horror movies of all time. I did read up a little bit about it, but I still kind of was under the assumption that it was a vampire movie with the title Alucarda. But that is barely correct, if correct at all, as we'll talk about. Yeah, so we both kind of went into a blind a little bit. Were we pleasantly surprised, unpleasantly surprised? We'll find out later in this episode.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world. The world of darkness. Nobody expected it.
Let's see what.
Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests. Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist.
This was Abby. This was Abby. A woman loved and in love until that night when something evil came looking for a soul to possess.
I can't stop thinking about your husband.
That creep. Forget him.
Was this Abby?
Now the fun starts.
Grab her! Hold her! Hear me, demon. Leave this woman's body!
Abby. Rated R.
I was at the hospital, Mr. Thorne, the night your son was born. I saw its mother.
I have fears. I've said fears.
What kind of fears?
Its mother, Mr. Thorne.
You saw my wife.
Its mother.
What is it you're trying to say?
His mother was a...
This is not a human child. Make no mistake.
There are those who will die for him. There are those who will kill for him. Who is he? What does he want? Where did he come from? And can he be stopped? Gregory Peck, Lee Remick, The Omen. If this is the truth, where does it end?
So I'm going to talk about the director of the film a little bit. His name is Juan Lopez Moctezuma, Mexican director. He only made 5 features throughout his career. Several of them were in the kind of horror supernatural genre. Earlier in the 1970s, he made movies called The Mansion of Madness from 1973 and Mary, Mary, Bloody Mary from 1975. So both of those, as the title suggests, were horror movies. He was the son of a judge. His family wanted and expected him to go into law. Lopez Moctezuma had other plans. He loved the arts. He was a jazz scholar. He actually hosted a radio show in Mexico City about jazz for a long time and kind of gained some fame through that show. He loved film. He loved theater. He started off in theater before he got into film. His stage productions led him to work with Alejandro Jodorowsky, who I was talking about before. Mm-hmm. Jodorowsky was the Chilean director who would soon make a splash in Mexican cinema with movies like Fondo and Lis, El Topo, and The Holy Mountain. Lopez Moctezuma co-produced Fondo and Lis, so their partnership started pretty early on. And these are, I kind of talked about this a little bit before, but these are crazy movies, like very surreal, like drug trips, very violent in some ways. If you haven't checked them out, I, recommend it, but like kind of prepare yourself going into it. It was one of the Beatles who really loved, I think it was The Holy Mountain. I'm pretty sure it was John Lennon who would just like watch it over and over and over again. So those were like famous kind of drug trip movies back in their day. And maybe there are some similarities with Alucarda in that way. So yeah, Juan Lopez Moctezuma, interesting guy. He was never a very commercial director. Like I said, he only made 5 features. He worked on the fringes of the Mexican film industry, and he has one quote where he said, "I am fairly inflexible. In the artistic field, I think I am fairly tough because I have principles I cannot betray." I like that quote, and I think it applies to this movie.
Yeah, I mean, you have to admire a creator who sticks to their guns. I think William Crane with Blackula, it comes to mind as well. Like he has a vision. He's gonna fight to see that vision realized. Del Toro is kind of like that too, obviously with way more commercial success.
Right. And I do think it's impressive when directors can straddle both worlds, when they can make work that is very entertaining and very kind of audience friendly, but still complex and powerful in different ways. So there's a lot to be said for that. But also I appreciate the directors who are just like, do not care about like making a lot of money at the box office and do their own thing. I always kind of love that. Yeah.
Tina Romero leads our cast here. She plays Alucarda / Lucy Westenra. Tina Romero is a New York City native who moved to Mexico City with her family when she was just a kid. She made her film debut in 1976 at age 27 in Lo Mejor de Teresa. The same year, she appeared in 2 movies by noted Mexican director Felipe Cazales, who represented a more outspoken and critical national cinema, Canoa. In 1977, Tina Romero appeared in Alucarda and the telenovela Santa. Later appeared in many telenovelas, Mexican films, and some Hollywood productions, including Missing in 1982. I've seen that. That's with Jack Lemmon.
Yeah, it is indeed. I have not seen that. I have seen Canoa, which is the Felipe Cazals movie that I just put in parentheses there. It's great. Highly recommend that movie. 1979, I think that's from. Really, really good.
All right. Nice. Susanna Camini joins Tina Romero as the Sisters of Satan, and Susanna Camini plays Justine. Justine is, Alucarda. I just want to describe the characters a little bit. Alucarda is a young woman. She was given up to this convent, this nunnery, by her mother in a prologue, and the mother was clearly possessed by Satan or some demon. So Alucarda from the get-go is already kind of marked by the devil. And as she grows up, now she's like a young woman. I think I was reading her as a teenager, but maybe she, obviously her age as the actress is older, but this young woman nonetheless is embattled with this demonic possession of her body. And she befriends Justine, who's like good girl in the beginning, who ultimately becomes corrupted by the forces of evil as portrayed through Alucarda. The actress who plays Justine, Susanna Comini, she didn't have a huge acting career aside from appearing in 4 Lopez Moctezuma films, and she mostly retired by the late 1980s. Overseeing this convent, this church, is Father Lozaro, and he's played by David Silva. David Silva was an actor-producer in the golden age of Mexican cinema, roughly 1936 to 1956. David Silva appeared in more than 100 films. He also appeared in 2 Jodorowsky movies, El Topo and The Holy Mountain. And rounding out our main cast here is Claudio Brook, plays Dr. Oschek, and the hunchback lives with a caravan type of people. He wears spangles and colorful clothing.
Has a ridiculous accent.
Yeah. Anyways, Claudio Brook often collaborated with Luis Buñuel, and their films included The Young One, 1960, Viridiana, 1961, The Exterminating Angel, 1962, Simon of the Desert in 65, and The Milky Way from 1969. Claudio Brook was one of his final roles was the villainous Dieter de la Guardia in Guillermo del Toro's Cronos. Very cool connection. I got to rewatch that movie.
Cronos is great. That might still be my favorite Del Toro movie. And that is a very cool connection. I love that Claudio Brook, Mexican actor who worked with Buñuel. Maybe Buñuel was Spanish, but made some of the best Mexican films of all time. Now he's appearing in this Del Toro film. I love that connection. It's so cool.
It must not be a coincidence, knowing now Del Toro's connection to this movie, because this character, this almost goat-like caricature, this gypsy character has the long goatee. He's got his ears are maybe even made up. He looks very goat-like, which is satanic in imagery. But it also reminded me very much of Pan's Labyrinth, the kind of imagery and the folk tale aspect. And now this satyr character is coming out of the woods to communicate with a young woman. I was like, this is Pan's Labyrinth in this moment.
Yeah.
And knowing Del Toro, it's probably not a coincidence.
No, Del Toro loves this movie. He's talked about his love for Alucarda. He said it's one of his favorite Mexican movies of all time. So
there you go.
Definitely not a coincidence. And you're right. That character, the hunchback character, is very goat-like. And I love the connection to Pan's Labyrinth. I think that's spot on. I also love how this actor, Claudio Brook, plays 2 characters, both that hunchback and the sort of the doctor, who is the symbol of reason and logic and modernity. And it's kind of flip sides of the same, it's kind of the contrast that the film is trying to present between age-old superstition and this new, because this movie is set in the late 19th century, this new kind of science and reason and logic. And in this movie, science kind of loses out. It's the forces of evil that we can't comprehend that sort of win at the end of the day, to some extent.
I gotta be honest, I didn't pick up on that double casting, actually. So that's a great way to drive home that theme that you just talked about.
Yeah, and I didn't pick up on that either until I read the cast list and like learned more about the production of the movie. So I love that duality, and yeah, cool. Maybe it's hard to say that anything in this movie is subtle, but like that is kind of like a subtle way to present that contrast, you know?
So I will say this actor, he is a terrific character actor. He really disappears into his character, so much so that again, I didn't realize he was also the doctor.
Pretty impressive, yeah. All right, so let's talk about the making of Alucarda a little bit. It is based on a classic Gothic novella that we've talked about on the podcast before called Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu from 1872. Very influential in vampire literature. It's from 1872, so it predates Dracula by 25 years. Carmilla is the story of a young woman pursued by the vampire Carmilla, and it kind of popularized the lesbian vampire trope, which we talked about with Dracula's daughter. So yeah, this Carmilla, definitely an influential work in horror literature, and we see it in this movie for sure. So production on Alucarda began in August 1975. Lopez Moctezuma put together the funding himself. It's kind of hard to find more information about where that funding came from. Like I mentioned before, it was an English language production, even though it was shot in Mexico. Horror was not popular in Mexico at the time, so the English language soundtrack, or dialogue, I should say, was in part an attempt to gain an international audience. Lopez Moctezuma kind of predicted that it might do better overseas than in Mexico, which turned out to be exactly the case. Historian David Wilt has raised another possible explanation for the fact that the film was shot in English. He believes that U.S. production companies funded Alucarda so they could receive a tax break for supporting productions in Mexico, which actually a lot of production companies did in the United States in the late 1970s. But those production companies, Wilt believes, then stipulated that the film be in English. So it's probably for those two reasons that the film is in English, even though it was shot in Mexico.
It is really fascinating to me, the long arm of Hollywood and getting its fingers into the production of, certainly in Japan, we've talked about AIP getting involved, funding these movies. And here in Mexico, yes, we'll make your Mexican film, but you have to have it in English. You have to do it this way and that way.
Yeah.
I just find that kind of hegemony. How do you say that word?
Hegemony? Yeah.
Hegemony. American hegemony.
Right. You can't get away from it. Yeah, you're totally right. And even like The Abominable Snowman, that was a Hammer horror film, but like, it was co-produced by American companies, featured several American actors who shaped the finished product of that film. So Abominable Snowman too, we see the, global influence of Hollywood in that movie as well.
Yeah.
Just, so, I guess an unfortunate fact, that's what, like Hollywood really kind of like rose to prominence, I think. Like it really entrenched its like power over the entire world during World War II, because like European companies were busy fighting the war, and at least until America entered the war, they really dominated the box office, like in like throughout the world, countries throughout the world, So even like, I don't know, from that point on after World War II, it was really Hollywood that kind of like dictated international filmmaking. And to some extent, that's probably still the case, but hopefully that's becoming less true over time. I don't know if it is, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. I'm thinking about, just real quick, we're talking about vampires and if not Mexican, at least Spanish language cinema. So Universal Studios at least had a practice in the late 20s, early 30s of simultaneously filming English language and Spanish language versions of whatever movie was in production. Case in point, Dracula with Bela Lugosi, English language film. At night, after Dracula's cast left, a Spanish-speaking cast came in, used the sets with a whole new director, and shot a Spanish language version. And that movie is kind of a cult classic in and of itself. If you get a chance to watch it, it's very interesting. But that was a common practice at the time, and Hollywood's proximity to Mexico, there was some sort of a beneficial relationship for both parties, I think. Definitely,
yeah. And it's maybe kind of unfortunate that was a short-lived practice, like shooting the same movie simultaneously in more than one language, like that, was a product of the early 1930s, like kind of the early sound era in general. And I think World War II kind of changed that a little bit, and then English language movies did kind of dominate throughout the world. But I mean, this is why it's so cool that we, unintentionally or not, are doing this like global tour of monster movies, because it's just more interesting to like see everything the world has to offer. Obviously,
Here.
yeah. So yeah, Alucarda, the production was intended to be avant-garde and non-commercial. Lopez Moctezuma, intended that from the start. However, it did have a very experienced crew that had worked in the commercial Mexican film industry for a long time. One example is the cinematographer Javier Cruz, who has shot over 160 films. Again, I did not recognize the majority of those titles, and that is a blind spot on my part. I would love to explore Mexican cinema a little bit more, but the crew members on this production, they were accomplished. They had worked on many, many movies, and even though the style of this movie is kind of in your face and like bizarre and surreal and dreamlike, it is like very accomplished, I think, in the production quality,
The photography of this movie absolutely stood out to me because, and I'll talk about it later, but this movie is visually enveloping. Like there's a sense to, like, the cinematography supports the storytelling, and I'm trying to do better at like looking out for that, because it's not just some effective lighting here and there. Like, no, there's intentionality that supports the overall story being told. That's really eye-catching in this movie.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. I'm sure we'll probably both have some specific examples later, but the set design in this movie I think is really beautiful too. It's very unrealistic. It looks very theatrical, but obviously that's the intention.
Yeah.
One last quick note here about the movie. Lopez Moctezuma initially planned on a sequel to be called Alucarda Rises from the Tomb, but sadly it was never made.
Justine rises from the tomb, and then she gets her head chopped off. Spoiler alert.
I think it might be one of the sisters, one of the nuns in the convent, who gets her head chopped off, because she's the one who's burned alive, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
But I think Justine, if I remember right, she kind of like, she bites the other nun in the throat, and then she gets holy water poured on her, and then she kind of just like disintegrates into nothing.
Yeah, that was definitely Justine.
Yeah. Poor Justine, man, I felt for her.
She gets it rough in this movie. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yep. And it's not exactly the Catholic Church, but I think like for all intents and purposes, it's meant to be the Catholic Church, is largely to blame for that, as we'll also talk about.
Oh, yeah. I'm just comparing her to Alucarda. Alucarda never gets abused the way Justine gets abused in this movie.
Yeah, very true.
That's kind of hard to watch sometimes. Just like the brutality against this woman, Justine. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, an innocent woman who is, the brunt of the movie's violence. It is hard to watch at times.
Yeah. All right. Well, the legacy of this film, first and foremost, it premiered in 1977 at the Paris Fantastique Film Festival. Reviews were negative, and the box office was poor in Mexico, where it played on theaters for only 2 weeks, in a censored version, no less. Why would you even watch this movie?
Right. It must have been like 40 minutes long,
I know. It's because it's not long to begin with.
Right.
But critic Leonardo Garcia Zhao, I think. Leonardo Garcia Zhao claimed it's, quote, one of the 10 worst films I've ever seen in my life. It's horrible. Very emphatic. I love that. More positively received, however, in other countries. It was released theatrically in France, but not in the US, as we mentioned. It later received a cult following after it was released on VHS in the US under those great titles, Sisters of Satan, Mark of the Devil 3, and Innocents from Hell. Retrospective reviews, however, are much more glowing, with some critics considering this among the best Mexican horror films of all time. We're going to say the man's name again. Guillermo del Toro has lauded this movie and Lopez Moctezuma in general. This is one of those movies that the average film goer, film lover, movie lover just has not seen. And I'm just speaking, before this podcast, I was very much like mid-tier movie lover. And now because of this podcast, I like to think I'm a little more, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I've seen some real diamonds in the rough that would not have come my way unless I went looking for them. That makes sense. Like this Alucarda is not going to cross your plate if you're just browsing through Netflix. You have to go find this movie, and I think you should. So there you go. There's my little speech.
I love it. That's the moral takeaway from this episode. There might be other moral lessons that we'll be talking about soon, but the main lesson: watch foreign movies. Push yourself a little bit. Be adventurous.
Do what you did. Google best Mexican horror films. Choose an old one and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, read up on the history a little bit. Like, I didn't really know a lot about Mexican cinema in the 70s, so it's just cool to learn about it and just again discover a new experience. That's what movies are all about.
You know what we could do? We could pick a random country. Let's say India, and let's pick a decade. You pick a decade.
1980s.
Great. Let's look up after this best horror movies of 1980s Indian cinema.
Man, let's do it. That sounds great. Especially because I'm sure we'll find some Bollywood movies, and Bollywood sadly is another kind of cinema that I just don't know very well. And I've been meaning to fix that for a long time.
Yeah. So we'll see what's out there. Listeners, this could be a fun game. You hit us with a country, a decade, and we'll see what happens.
I love this game. This is fun. Man, this might be our next season's lineup. Who knows?
Movies you've never heard of.
Yeah.
But maybe you should.
Our next podcast, yeah. All right, it is time for our sponsor break. Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information. Vincent, what do we have in Mina's mailbox today?
Oh, so much. You know what? We don't get enough mail these days in our fast-paced cyber world. But here we go, reading some mail. And we have one, it was an email from our anonymous patron. Fantastic stuff. He goes into the Abominable Snowman's versions of release between the US and the UK and cut footage and this and that. Love that information, but I want to keep it short and sweet here and just shout out that, Matt, we were wrong in how we pronounced the screenwriter's name, Nigel Neal. So I'll read anonymous patron's email to us. He says, was going to ask you about Nigel Neal. Maybe I misheard, but it sounded like you were pronouncing his name like Niger instead of Nigel. Did you see something about how he pronounced his name differently? Everything I have seen has always said Nigel. And Steffi was great. You should have her back soon.
I wonder if one of us just said Niger and the other ones were just yeah, I'm going to assume that's correct and went with it. That's probably what happened,
Yeah.
Our bad. Whoopsie daisies. But Steffi was great. Thanks again to Steffi, Theodora. Hopefully we'll have her back in the podcast someday.
So following anonymous patron's email, we have Don on the Abominable Snowman. And Don says via Spotify, this was a very interesting film. Made me think that I need to watch more Hammer films. I liked the buildup of suspense, although there wasn't as much horror elements as I expected. That didn't really take any enjoyment away, just unexpected. Peter Cushing was great in his role as a scientist. Cinematography and music were quite impressive. Those shots of the mountains with the majestic music were amazing. I definitely enjoyed this one and will recommend this movie.
Thank you, Don. Totally agree 100% of the way. I feel like when I first watched it, I did expect a little bit more action, a little bit more horror, and maybe I was a little bit too negative on the movie for that reason. But now that I know what it is, if I watch it again, maybe I'll be more forgiving because I know what it's trying to do.
I feel the same way. It's one of those movies that has actually stuck with me and grown on me, and I'd like to revisit it.
Yeah, I think I will too someday. Yeah.
Yeah.
The appearance of the snowman at the end is still kind of ridiculous, but maybe in a charming way. That's the camp element, obviously.
Yeah, it has its moments.
Yeah.
And then Sean Childers wrote in and said, Ginger Dead Man, which is a horror movie from the 2000s. about a killer gingerbread man.
Hey, sign me up. I've heard that title before, and I do love that title. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Any like monster-based pun in a movie title is all right by me.
Baked goods turning evil. We don't get enough of them.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of reminds me of Killdozer a little bit, where the title is the best part of the movie, but that is a great title.
That is true. Ginger Dead Man meets Killdozer.
Oh man. I don't think I would watch that. but I'll try Ginger Dead Man first. If I like that one, maybe the crossover would work. We'll see.
We'll see. Thank you everybody for writing in. Truly keep them coming.
Yeah, so much. It's always good to read those messages like you said, Vincent. Thank you again everybody. What is coming up on the Poverty Row Picture Show?
Oh, Peter Lorre, he's got a questionable one for us this week, but you know, he talk about a film lover. He dives deep, and good, bad, or campy, he's on the forefront. He's got a movie called The Vampire's Ghost from 1945. According to Letterboxd, the tagline for this movie is "Slave of the Bloodlust." Maybe not a great tagline because this movie is set in Africa, at a tawdry bar run by an old man named Webb Fallon. And Fallon is actually a vampire, but he is becoming weary of his life of the past few hundred years. I don't know, Matt. I'm hearing Africa. I'm hearing slaves. I'm hearing vampires and B movies. I'm not holding my breath for this one.
Yeah, that sounds rough. Peter is truly doing the Lord's work. He's doing a service for us all. He will watch literally anything. I hope it goes okay. Good luck to you, Peter. I should mention the next time I see Peter, I should tell him I saw him in a movie from 1946, I think it was, called The Verdict. Sidney Greenstreet is in it. It's a film noir. I just saw that at the Heights Cinema. Peter Lorre is the best part of it. He's amazing. He plays this like illustrator who like draws courtroom scenes for like very grisly murder trials. And he's like very world weary and cynical, and he's fascinated by, you know, all these deaths and murders and everything, but then like it wears on him over the years and he becomes totally disillusioned with people. And he's fantastic. So if I see him, or Vincent, if you happen to see him anytime soon, please tell Peter he was so good in The Verdict.
I will tell him that. I think I have a Teams meeting with him in a couple hours after I hop off of this call. So yeah, I'll pass it along.
Nice. I'm amazed he can even like work his laptop and figure out the technology. I would not have expected that of him.
Peter, do not underestimate Mr. Lorre. He transcends time and technology.
You're right. That was rude of me. Sorry, Peter. If you can give such an amazing performance, you can handle Microsoft Teams.
Welcome to the Poverty Row Studios on the other side of Hollywood. Yes, where the stars were dimmer and the red carpets dripped with blood. Together we will watch the best of the worst. Movies known for their limited budgets, their outlandish concepts, and questionable performances. But with enough haunted houses, zombies, ape men, and devil bats to keep you up at night. This is the Poverty Row Picture Show, and I dare you to sleep through these nightmares. I am your host, the walking, talking, reanimated devil known as Peter Lorre. You may know me from a certain movie called The Verdict. Yes, with my pal, big old Sidney Greenstreet. The Verdict is a film noir. It is worth your time. But you heard it from me and not that rotten scoundrel Matthew Cole Levine. It is all well and good. Yes, how can I be mad when I am here on the beaches of the South Pacific with my darling Lenore? She drinking pina coladas and I slurping fish heads on the rocks. And you know, my pasty white skin is not burned too bad under this infernal sun. Sort of reminds me of a certain vampire from the Republic film, The Vampire's Ghost. Yes, from 1945, this movie is about the 400-year-old vampire who haunts the villages of Central Africa, doomed and depressed. Things take a turn for Dramasville when other white people arrive and our vampire takes an interest in the young beauty. In his pursuit, the vampire knocks off all those in his way. Now, despite the potential of an African location, the vampire's ghost is everything you would expect from a vampire chiller of the 40s, aversions to mirrors and the like. However, this vampire can walk during the day, and he sports some rather groovy shades. Now, I will leave it up to your judgment as to the effectiveness of this choice, but above all, the vampire's ghost is not a total drag. In fact, there are some good performances and solid enough screenplay, however derivative. We may attribute the more entertaining aspects of the picture to co-writer, a woman named Lee Brackett. Miss Brackett was, yes, a woman, which was rare among screenwriters of the time. Furthermore, Miss Brackett would go on to pen a little ditty known as The Big Sleep with my other pal, Humphrey Bogart. The Howard Hawks picture, Rio Bravo, and perhaps most interesting to listeners of Camp Kaiju, The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, Lee Brackett was a noted writer of science fiction in the mid-20th century and penned the original drafts of the Star Wars sequel before it began production. Nonetheless, her name remains in the credits for her work. This initial screenplay has officially been published, and I would recommend you give it a read. There you have it, listeners. From African jungle vampires to the icy battlefields of Hoth, the vampire's ghost lurks among the bushes. So after watching this movie and the previous Phantom Speaks, dare I say we are on a hot streak. Can our next film continue the trend? It is called The Strangler of the Swamp, and I dare anyone to strangle this ghost from his sandy beach paradise.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White, the girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her. The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date for the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian De Palma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
Back to Alucarda. What a strange, interesting, fascinating movie this is. There are a lot of themes in this movie, or at least, like the themes are a little bit messy, but they're certainly overt. They're like right there in the foreground of the movie,
Mm-hmm. I see you have these great notes here. You can read those notes. I'll just kind of go off the top of my head. When a movie critiques Catholicism, which you see a lot in Mexican cinema, at least what I've seen, like from Del Toro, The Untamed touches on religious themes, and it's religious in terms of oppression, in terms of not being able to, quote, I don't know, be your true self. Sexual repression, certainly in this movie. I mean, nuns by nature, priests by nature, by profession, are celibate. So I think there's a lot of tension in that in filmmaking and storytelling. And in this movie in particular, I think I definitely see the themes of sexual repression with the lesbianism and the structure of the church as a system, as an entity in and of itself to tamp down on quote deviant lifestyles. A lot of imagery supports that. I was getting a lot of like Spanish Inquisition type imagery with men in hoods and lots of fire and candles and torture devices.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think in terms of Catholicism as a subject to critique here?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think ultimately in the movie we do kind of see, Justine and Alucarda very quickly develop this very close, intimate friendship, which soon becomes more than a friendship. It's very clear that they have romantic feelings for each other. And Alucarda does kind of seemingly invite, evil forces into Justine's life, and they start blaspheming in the church. They start saying sacrilegious things to their priest and the other nuns around them. But then it becomes clear, I think, in the movie that these very harsh, vindictive, cruel priests and nuns and overseers who torture Justine for like what they consider to be the evil, the sins she supposedly committed, they do things infinitely worse. They bleed her. They, in a scene that's like very much like the crucifixion, they ultimately kill Justine. And then Alucarda comes back and has her bloody, insane vengeance, which is just a crazy final scene in the movie. So yeah, I think the themes in this movie are a little bit, they kind of have things both ways at once in some ways, because I think Alucarda and Justine at least Alucarda is possessed by something. We don't know exactly what. So there are evil forces here, but then like what's really the evil thing, the very destructive, violent thing, is this cruel, oppressive, patriarchal institution of Catholicism.
Right.
So it is kind of messy, but I do think that theme gets across in the end.
What drove it home for me was the juxtaposition between two set pieces. There's a sequence where Alucarda and Justine go into the forest and there's an orgy, a very satanic ritual, but everyone's dancing and euphoric and having sex, which is just like whatever like the moral or ethics of that is. The fact is these are human beings without a care in the world and being as free and open with their bodies as they can be without judgment. That is juxtaposed with the Catholic Church, which is ostensibly the quote good entity of love and love's messaging. However, ironically, it's the church that tortures and kills and does absolutely nothing but repress to the point of abuse. And so like that juxtaposition really drove home those themes of agency, empowerment, female autonomy, which is a central theme related to that good versus evil presentation.
Yeah, well said. I think you're totally right. And I think the scene where Alucarda is kind of being forced to confess to Father Lorenzo, that's his name? I think that's his name. She's being forced to confess to the priest, and she doesn't. She basically says, like, I have nothing to confess. I haven't committed any sins. And she basically says that he is, very loosely paraphrasing here, but he's on a power trip. He's kind of, he's not sexually satisfied, so he's just condemning everybody else around him, especially her and Justine. And it's hard to argue with that. I mean, there's a lot of truth in that, I think, So like what is seen as like the very sacrilegious things that Alucarda says to him, is it sacrilegious, or is that just what an institution of religion would say to kind of maintain its sense of power,
I think as a result of the lustration of the priest, of these nuns, like it's gotta, whatever that feeling inside, it's gotta come out one way or the other. And if you can't be having sex, sometimes people resort to violence.
Yeah, there's a lot we could say about that, but in this movie, at least, there are no incels in this movie, probably, but like there are definitely like Yeah, it's sexual frustration. It's like using religion as a tool of control. And, there was a Letterboxd review that said it very well, which I would like to quote. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, so this was written by a Letterboxd reviewer just named Brian. I don't have any more information than that. So, Brian, if you happen to be listening, thank you for this quote. Please take credit for it if you want. But Brian says Christian institutions, or in this case, Catholic institutions, sublimate the erotic drives of their constituents into persecuting the erotic drives of others. And that's basically what we see here with the priests and the nuns in this movie. There's another quote. I would just, doing research on this was pretty fascinating because there's been a lot of really compelling things written about just how complicated and provocative this movie is. So there are two scholars who have written a lot about Alucarda, Raul Rodriguez Hernandez and Claudia Schaefer. I do just want to quote one of the things they wrote in one of their works. They wrote, "Actions taken by two young women, in this case Alucarda and Justine, against teachings, structure, and moral guiding principles of the Church speak directly to a post-1968 generation that celebrates the body but has lost faith in the society's master narratives." There's a lot to that quote, but I think that's especially fascinating because, Alucarda has an anti-Catholic, strain to it or theme in it. And I think that can be extended to being like anti-government. I think there was a lot of frustration with the Mexican government by a lot of different Mexican films around this time. We talked about the movie Canoa from the late 70s earlier in the episode. And I love this quote because I think it shows how the movie's condemnation of a very oppressive religious institution can then be extended to the government and how they exert control over their citizens,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I wasn't even thinking about the historical cultural context of the piece here. It's 10 years, less than 10 years since, the sexual liberation of the 1960s. And you have very conservative institutions like the Catholic Church. And I'm not Catholic, and I don't, I'm just spitballing here, but conservative institutions have to reckon with progressive waves that happen in the culture. Maybe we're dealing with that right now. And what's that backlash? And I think you could see a depiction of that in a fictional film like Alucarda.
Definitely, yeah. It's a good point that I think a similar thing might be happening right now. We haven't really had any movies like Alucarda in this current historical period that we're in, but maybe they'll be coming at some point. But yeah, I think when things seem very oppressive and restrictive, then I think you do lose faith in those master narratives and maybe believing in the body and connection between two people or more people kind of takes precedence a little bit,
Yeah, I also saw this movie again as a story about two young women who it's like a coming of age as well. They're confused. They find stable ground in each other because they're not finding it in their church, which is also their home where they live. They're finding it in Satan. They're finding some sort of community. Again, I'm not talking about the moral aspect of it or whatever. I'm just saying like these young girls who are abused more than men for sure in this world are finding stable ground wherever they can. And if it leads them to a path of destruction, it's only because they were driven there by people who were supposed to be taking care of them.
Perfectly said. Absolutely. Yeah. You're totally right. And I think basically it's a love story, and I think a different movie, if it was like more character focused and a little bit more about like the story, which I mean, like the narrative is very loose in Alucarda. So that's not the focus of this movie, but I think a different movie would focus on the relationship between Justine and Alucarda, which is tender, even though, so much of the movie is like bloody and like very sexual. Like their relationship still is a mutual support,
Right. I mean, and yeah, they truly care about each other. Alucarda truly cares about her because that's why she flips out at the end.
Yep. And they have a blood pact, which is done very like intimately in their private rooms. But I think the focus in that scene is on like intimacy and not horror, like despite the blood involved, it's not like a scary moment. You know what I mean?
And despite the nudity,
Yeah.
Full frontal, listeners. Don't be caught unawares. Like
Yeah.
you get everything.
Don't watch this in a library.
Don't watch this with the kids around.
Yeah.
But with that said, despite the nudity, despite because like when I first saw that, I thought, because like, I didn't know anything, I thought, is this movie going to go into something really sleazy, into something almost pornographic? It doesn't. It's actually, like you said, intimate. So I think that actually goes a long way in selling this movie and those moments as something to be taken sincerely and not exploitatively.
Definitely. I had the same concern as you, and I like, especially in that early orgy scene, like, there are like hooded figures and like goat figures and everything. It was like, oh, where is this going? This might be going in some questionable territory, but like, that's really the most, what's the word? Tawdry, I guess, scene in the movie where it's like, maybe there is a little bit of like sexual titillation there, but like, for the most part, that's not the point of the movie.
You're right. And for the most part, it is, in terms of sexual explicitness, it kind of gets it out of the way in the beginning. And then for most of the movie, it's like, all right, everyone's clothed and it's watchable.
Yeah, totally. They might be on fire or, like decapitated or bathing in blood, but when she's bathing in blood, she is actually fully nude. But like most of the time, there's not, they're clothed and it's okay. It's not
But
super
she's covered
objectionable.
in blood, which covers her nudity. It's like when people paint their bodies.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Performance art. I do think there's another contrast that we should talk about briefly. And that's, we briefly mentioned this earlier, but it's kind of like modern science and logic and reason as represented by Dr. Oshchek versus like the traditional superstition that's practiced by the church, but also by Justine and Alucarda in a way. And I think the Dr. Oshchek character is pretty interesting. He's like mostly benevolent. He's trying to help. He's worried about the health and welfare of Justine and Alucarda. And he's like scandalized by what the church is doing. When he walks into the torture chamber and he sees that Justine has died, he is totally traumatized, or that's not the right word. He's shocked by it, But I like the medicine that he practices is still kind of like a way to, like, he thinks that he's in control, but he's not. Like, things quickly go downhill after that, I do, it reminded me, though, we were talking about, like, possession movies from the 70s and late 60s, and it reminded me of Rosemary's Baby a little bit, a classic of that subgenre, where poor Rosemary, played by Mia Farrow, is... there's a similar sort of like network of like oppressive institutions in that movie too. Like, first of all, it's patriarchy and manhood in general because her husband is, a misogynist who doesn't really care about her at all. And then it's Catholicism because Rosemary was raised Catholic and kind of taught to be subservient as a wife and a mother. But then it is also healthcare and medicine because her obstetrician, actually both of the obstetricians that she sees, are against her and betray her in the end. So, maybe there's kind of a similar network of evil forces in Alucarda as in Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary's Baby, man, that movie would knock your socks off. Listeners, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it for you, actually, because don't let me overhype it either, but just go in to it and pay attention to it. Like, that's what I would say. Like, don't get distracted by your phone or anything else. Like, sit down, commit to watching Rosemary's Baby, and let us know what you think.
Yes, please. In my opinion, you cannot overhype Rosemary's Baby. That's one of my favorites, one of the best horror movies ever, one of the best American movies of the 60s. So I'm going to overhype it, but
okay. It's just it's one of the strongest examples of storytelling on film that I've ever seen. Like, it's just so well constructed and it's so tight in the character journeys and the script. It's just a phenomenal storytelling.
It is, yeah. And I think, it does those things better than Alucarda does. Not that Alucarda is trying to do those things. I don't think it's necessarily trying to be, tell like a cohesive story or be totally character based. But I think Rosemary's Baby does those things so well that it succeeds where Alucarda probably does not,
Well, let's talk about other movies because see your notes here. This in the 70s, maybe post Exorcist, and what other movies come to mind in this maybe golden age of satanic possession movies?
Yeah, I mean, The Omen is definitely a big example. Not personally one of my favorites in in horror cinema. And I think a big reason is because what's the Linda Blair's character's name in The Exorcist? Regan, that's her name. The Exorcist is so scary because you buy that child performance and you believe that she is possessed by the devil, you know? With The Omen, I feel like you always know it's like a kid in a movie, like giving a performance, and it's not very scary in my opinion. So you really have to sell the idea that this demonic force is ruining childhood innocence. And if you don't buy that, then it's not very scary. And that's why I think The Exorcist works and The Omen doesn't. But The Omen is, a big franchise and was very popular.
Yeah. Have you heard of Abby, the blaxploitation film?
Only because of you telling me about it. It sounds really fascinating though.
Yeah, 1974. It's really interesting. I did not know this when I went into. I found it on. It's not streaming anywhere. I found an old beat up 16 millimeter version on YouTube. Turns out that's really the only place you can find it because it is so close to The Exorcist that Warner Brothers has sued it from any kind of distribution.
Wow.
Which is historically fascinating to me. But if you find it on YouTube, despite the quality, watch it. It is basically The Exorcist. At some points, it really inhibits the movie because you're like, The Exorcist did this better. But in other points, it does do its own thing. And those are really refreshing. And I'm like, okay, I like what this is doing here. So Abby, 1974. William Marshall is in it. He plays the priest. Yeah, that's what I would check out. Alucarda does things a little bit maybe conventionally tighter than Abby. It's not a ripoff of The Exorcist. but it's also how can we compare things to The Exorcist when The Exorcist casts such a large shadow?
Yeah, it's unfair for sure. I recently watched a movie called To the Devil a Daughter, which is also about a satanic conspiracy. It was actually Hammer Horror's last film in their sort of classical period. It's from 1976, I think.
I just heard about that film, but go on.
I think ultimately it's not really very good. It had a very troubled production. There's some really sleazy stuff Nastasia Kinski is in it. She's very young, but she's very sexualized, and it's hard to look past that in the movie. But she's in it, Christopher Lee is in it, Richard Widmark is in it, and that cast is phenomenal. And there are some really strange, nightmarish scenes where it's all these things we've been talking about, tradition versus modernity and religion versus Satan, obviously. So, there's some good imagery in it, but ultimately not a very good movie. Well, great cast though. But it does beg the question, were all these movies just made to cash in on the success of The Exorcist, or was there something bigger in society and politics going on that made people very paranoid about religion is not what it used to be, and there are all these evil forces in the world, you know what I mean?
I would say that success follows success, so there was probably a lot to owe to The Exorcist's success, but I'm also thinking about music. And you had bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath who really tapped into this dark imagery, this dark religious satanic imagery. And they weren't doing it because The Exorcist was a success. They were clearly reflecting some sort of cultural revolution. But I think that also goes back to the 60s, generally speaking, some sort of progressive dam had burst and people were just more liberated and free to explore what's this dark side of religion that I wasn't able to explore before, but now I can.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I like what you said before about conservatism versus progressivism, and that comes through in movies and music, obviously. And it's Yeah, if you start to like doubt or mistrust the forces of law and order, like just bigger kind of like forces of control, then you're going to try to find ways to push against that, you know? And that happened in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of reason to distrust our government in the 70s. History teacher at time, Watergate, Vietnam. Those are the big things. But that's all you need. Like all of a sudden the government is not here to the government is not a people lost trust in the government at that time. In the 50s and the early 60s, in the 40s, like the government's here to protect us. They're an altruistic institution. But then our illusion broke and we realized, oh, the government is sending us to our deaths for some ill-conceived reason in Vietnam. The government is spying on us and Nixon has to resign. Yeah, it just since then we've, I think, rightfully so as Americans, have questioned our institutions.
Yeah.
And it comes out in films too.
Yes, 100% agree. I love that. And like now I'm kind of wondering, where are the modern day movies that are going to like kind of like push against things a little bit, but we'll see if they're made or not. Who knows?
Do we need a new American new wave?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to imagine in like an age of streaming and an age of like, you know, disposable entertainment, but like I'm not totally cynical. It can happen. I hope it does.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another time.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you to Alucarda for like getting us in this direction, you know, for pushing us into this conversation. It's great.
Yeah, it's a tough film. Again, it affronts your senses. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. Like, because you can do that in art, you know, it's catharsis, and like that's a safe place to do it. And, you know, yeah, it's you can talk about these sort of uncomfortable things in a movie like Alucarda.
Mm-hmm.
A couple quick things I wanted to say about the form and the aesthetic in the movie, just because, like, there is kind of a lot to it. Like you said, it's very in your face. It's kind of a disorienting style. One kind of theater that Lopez Moctezuma and also Jodorowsky practiced in Mexico, something called Panic Theater was the name of it. So it's live theater that's very intense, very in your face. There was nudity, like simulated sex acts on stage. There was violence, sometimes even like real blood, like cutting on stage of the actors and everything. Wow. And the entire point of it was to make the audience uncomfortable and like sometimes to engage them in the performance in audience participation. And I think we can see that. I think both Lopez Moctezuma and Jodorowsky brought that panic theater aesthetic to the films they made. And we absolutely see that in Alucarda. And it's like you said, Vincent, it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you pay attention, and it's kind of expressing things that are hard to put into words, you know? You have a theater background. Have you heard about any similar performances like that or like artistic movements?
Yeah. There's the first thing that came to my mind was a 1920s play from France called the English translation is Spurt of Blood.
Mm.
And it's like a one-page play, but it's very influential in the avant-garde movement. And the play, like there's animals, there's blood spurting. So like even actually just like performing it is not, I'm not gonna say it's not possible. It gets performed, but it's to perform it literally written. It's almost impossible. Like that's not even the point. So it's very avant-garde in that way. And there's other movements, the Dada movement in the 1910s, which affected art, the art world in general, like, you know, a urinal placed in a public square. Is that art? The debate continues.
Right.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but there's the really well-known French theater tradition of violence and gore and spectacle, sensationalism. I can't pronounce French. Theater de Grand Guignol. The theater Grand Guignol.
Yeah.
But like body horror on stage, I mean, people would go for the experience. They're not going for character-based narratives. They're going for in-your-face violence, stylized violence. So I definitely think of that when I hear of panic theater.
And what you said about like they're not character-based narratives, I think that applies so perfectly to Alucarda, for better or worse.
Yeah, right. That's not my forte / cup of tea as an actor, as a viewer, but I respect the hell out of it.
Exactly, yeah. It definitely serves a political purpose, and there's a lot of power to that kind of performance in that kind of film. It's time for the good, the bad, and the campy here on Camp Kaiju. We've already talked about so many of the themes, and I'll just leave that there. I love a movie that is so complicated, so thought-provoking, that has so much to say about the state of the world and the state of Mexico in this case. But I also just love how this movie looks. It's so theatrical. I talked about the sets before. The art director was a man named Cleomenes Stamatiadis. Great name and great art direction. The sets in this movie, they look like they couldn't actually exist anywhere on the planet. They're so like phantasmagoric maybe is a better word for it.
Yeah.
Like even like the interior of the convent is like seems to be like chiseled out of rock. The sort of like grotto where they have this orgy is like seemingly on a soundstage and is like filled with like lush green grass and everything. It just looks amazing. And I really do appreciate movies that don't even aim for realism. Like sometimes that's what you're going for, but in this movie, like the more demented and like nightmarish, the better. And I just love the visual style of this movie so much.
Very cool. Adding on to that, like I said, in the cinematography, the use of shadow in this movie, it's not just like, oh, we've got some shadows. So many scenes are like the action happens in a pool of light and then darkness surrounds them. You cannot see the walls in the rooms.
Yeah.
And so like action will be happening and then a character emerges from the darkness. You didn't even know they were there. And it's so unsettling and provocative. I think Alucarda emerges from the darkness at one point. That's really effective. And then speaking of Alucarda, her costume is a black smock of some kind, turtlenecky. So then when she is enveloped in shadow, it's literally just her head. Oh, and because her hair completely surrounds her face, this lush mane of black hair. So often when she's on screen, she's a floating face. And it's a really cool effect.
Yeah. Totally. I love that. And that happens at the end of the movie where like she's basically setting a lot of people on fire. This is her like act of vengeance at the end of the movie. And like you do just see like her floating head and like a little flicker of flame like right in front of her eyeball. And that's how the movie suggests that she is like setting people on fire. And it's just so, yeah, bizarre and dreamlike and beautiful, but also terrifying. It's like, like a similar thing happens at the end of Carrie, but it's like totally different in this movie.
Interesting comparison. I'll get to that in a second. My thoughts on that. What else did I really like? So again, I mentioned how the sexual imagery in this film is done actually tastefully, for as tastefully as you can get in a movie like this. There's also male frontal nudity, which I was just like, hey, I appreciate that because we're keeping things equitable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just female exploitation. It could be male exploitation too.
Yeah.
And the moment when Justine and Alucarda do undress, up until then, I will admit, I was kind of like, all right, it's another Exorcist movie. It's another possession movie. I see exactly where this movie's going to go. And then it completely went the other direction. And I went, oh, I have no idea where this is going. This is great. Now you have my attention, movie. So that was a good thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. You saying exploitation before reminded me that this movie is sometimes referred to as mexploitation, which is just kind of ridiculous, but also referred to some of those Jodorowsky movies where there is like sex and nudity and violence, but also mixed with like political provocation and like avant-garde sort of like aesthetics. So there is like an actual style or like description to the word mexploitation. I still don't know how often I'm going to use that, but yeah, I feel like it's actually kind of contradictory in a way because I agree with what you're saying, which is that it doesn't ultimately seem all that exploitative, like even though it's in your face, it's like it is worried about the characters, and it's like, yeah, it's not just trying to shock you, you know?
Right, which I think that's what exploitation is.
Right.
Rather than, I think it's intent. I think it's intent, and I don't think the intent is pure shock. I think it's still to tell a story, and artistically, if that involves nudity, well, that's art too. So,
yeah,
how many painters paint nude figures, and we go, let's put that in a museum. But you look at Alucarda, you may not have that same thought, but I think you should, because it's just done artfully more than shockingly.
Yeah, totally. And I think, another thing that I'll put in the good category is Tina Romero as Alucarda. I think she gives an amazing performance. And I think, she and also Susanna Camini, but especially Romero, is so good. And I think, a big reason why the movie does not seem callous and shocking and exploitative is because of the actors. And they I think with Romero especially, we see the tenderness early on, and we see the sort of liberation of the time that she spends with Justine. But then we also absolutely believe her fury and her rage and her, her revenge at the end. So Romero is great, and she's a big part of this movie's success, I would say.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to mention that again, echo some of the folk fairy tale aesthetic with the satyr-like character.
Mm-hmm.
And the flogging of the nuns, which was really brutal and violent and bloody. And that scene is specifically what's juxtaposed with the orgy, which is actually a very peaceful ceremony compared to this awful, abusive ceremony in the church.
When we hear the word orgy, we probably think it's sordid and evil or negative in some way. But the orgy is full of intimacy, obviously. And that's a lot better than self-flagellation and blood and torturing yourself for no reason. So that's a very powerful contrast for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the bad stuff, maybe this sounds unadventurous of me, but I do still want a little bit of character depth. And I think if this movie had a little bit more of that with Alucarda and Justine, then it would be more powerful in many different ways. It wouldn't just be this provocative, aggressive sort of stylish thing. It would also have this kind of emotional power that I don't think Alucarda has or probably is really even going for. But early on, again, we do see the love that these two characters have for each other. And even though thematically, I think it makes sense why that all gets blown apart by the end of the movie, I think emotionally it's not really there. And it could have been if the movie spent just a little bit more time on who these young women actually are as people,
I wrote, style over substance, maybe a little bit, and which I love and I appreciate. But my cup of tea is I do want a little bit more time with the characters themselves, because the movie's only 90 minutes. It's 100 minutes, but there were moments where I was kind of, it was kind of the pace, not the pace, but I was kind of losing interest a little bit. And then a person would be on fire, and I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, that's cool. Okay, so to be more articulate, the movie does it's kind of a one note movie. Alucarda gets chastised by some nuns, and she cries. And then Justine is tortured, and she cries. And then Alucarda. It kind of is the same thing until we get to the end.
Yeah. You're right about that, yeah.
Yeah, which is hard to sustain for an audience member, I think.
Yeah. Maybe just more of a dynamic tone might have been good if there were some moments of quiet and slowing down and focusing on the characters instead of everything just kind of being so intense all the time. Then it might have seemed less repetitive,
Yeah. But that's a style thing. But I don't have any specific bad things. Everything, all the particulars were very strong.
Yeah, and I think even the things I didn't personally like all that much were probably intentional. That's the movie that they wanted to make,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think probably another example of that, which might lead us into the campy category a little bit, is I think most of the performances outside of Romero are pretty over the top. They're like very heightened. And like Claudio Brook, I think again, he does probably what is intended of him, like, but I mean, like that hunchback is so over the top, ridiculous accent, absurd makeup, and like, who even is this character and like these traveling nomads, like just outside of the convent, And that kind of like over the top theatricality, again, intentional, but like probably does like take you out of the movie a little bit.
It's different. It's so tonally different. It's like, yeah, it's like Pan's Labyrinth. But then the movie never really sticks with that aesthetic, that choice. Yeah, it's like a weird intrusion into an otherwise conventional story, tonally. Well, that character when he's the doctor, that actor when he plays the doctor, there's a point where he goes like into his library and he opens a book simply titled Satan. And I thought, well, that's an aptly named book.
Right. That is great. Yeah. And it just like lingers on that title page for a while, which is awesome.
This book is about Satan. It's like 500 pages long.
Yeah. That's like maybe all of the books in his library. That's all they're about. Just Satan over and over again. But yeah, I thought that was ridiculous. And there's even kind of like a Dracula tribute or homage in the movie where they see the coffin of, apparently it's Alucard's mom, Lucy Westenra, which is the name of a character in Dracula. So not campy per se, but maybe just like a little tip of the hat to like horror, lore beforehand.
Surprisingly, this movie I found light on camp. I mean, it is over the top. It is exaggerated, but it is still very serious in its intentions.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. I feel like some of the stylistic things are like kind of outdated in a way. Like they're really quick, like zoom in and zoom out, they do that a couple times, but I think it's actually pretty effective. It works in the context of the movie,
The nuns' costumes, I've never seen those before.
Yeah.
That seemed campy to me, and they're probably historically accurate, but I thought they look silly. In a campy way.
You're right. I was wondering about that. I thought maybe it was like an attempt to not be Catholicism per se, to like maybe be like, it's some other made up religion or something, or maybe it's just like part of the sort of like surreal visual style of the movie. I wasn't totally sure about that.
I want to do my research here, but without knowing anything, these costumes were vaguely futuristic to me. So maybe maybe it's underpinning the theme that these nuns are just robots, just automatons within this institution. So they're all going to look like space robot women.
I like that. Yeah, I'll go with that reading.
All right.
Cool. I do think
I'll flesh it out. I'll work on it.
Yeah, that can be the next script that you write. I can't wait. I do think in a way that kind of does go along with like the style of some of those earlier Jodorowsky movies like El Topo and the Holy Mountain, where it's like not at all trying to be realistic, even though I think it's El Topo is kind of a Western and there are like some gunslinger characters, but they don't wear costumes that look anything like any cowboy that you've ever seen before. So I think maybe part of it is just like that style where it's, again, very over the top, just like not even trying to like resemble anything we recognize in reality. It's a look, though. It's definitely a look.
It's a look. That'll be my next Halloween costume.
Wow. Oh, my God. Maybe I'll go as the hunchback, the goat-like hunchback.
There you go.
It'll be an Alucarda Halloween. Nobody will know what's going on.
Nobody at all.
It'll be great. All right. Alucarda, one-of-a-kind film. And now it is the time for us to give it a rating. As always on Camp Kaiju, we have 4 ratings here. Number 1, it's a timeless classic. It definitely stands the test of time. Number 2, there may be some antiquated moments, but overall it's great. It stands the test of time. Our 3rd rating, it may be historically significant or just fun, but it does not stand the test of time. And our lowest rating, it is not worth revisiting. It definitely does not stand the test of time.
This is one of those movies where at first watch, I was like, I could take it or leave it. But after this discussion, understanding a little bit more about the artists involved, and it may not be my cup of tea, but this is a strong cup of tea. It's a strong brew, and it's done with care and craft. So I'm going to give it our second highest rating. I think it does stand the test of time in a lot of ways thematically, but I would like to see more investment in the characters themselves, so I have a little bit more substance with my spectacle. And for better or for worse, I do think of other movies that do combine that spectacle with character-based narratives. The Exorcist, and I think Carrie also nails that duality really well. But Alucarda, I think she should be up there with Carrie, with Regan, as a real lady you don't want to cross with. Hey, that was a pun. No pun intended. You don't want to cross with some holy nonsense.
Man, I mean, your review could be mine verbatim, basically. I'm also going to give this our second highest rating. There may be some antiquated moments or just things that don't totally work for me personally. But overall, it's great. I mean, it's such a one-of-a-kind movie. It's very powerful. Love the formal style, which is so creative and adventurous. I do think what makes this movie so distinct and so powerful, it is also maybe what keeps it from greatness, where it's like so provocative and in your face the entire time. It never really slows down to like truly depict the characters and to make us feel what's at stake emotionally. But there are many other things going on in this movie that are so fascinating to think about and reflect, the late 70s in Mexico, and as we were talking about, really a lot of the world at that time. So, yeah, fascinating movie. I'm very glad we, watched Alucarda. We introduced ourselves to a new kind of movie, and for anybody out there who hasn't seen it, prepare yourself mentally, but check it out. It's worth it.
Yeah, because honestly, it both. It's just not what I expected. It ended up being a surprise in a lot of ways, in a lot of good ways.
Absolutely, yeah. One of a kind. Thank you again for staying tuned to this episode. Next time, we're going to talk about Troll Hunter and visit Norway on our trip around the world. So join us for that. Thank you again for hanging out, friends. Please rate and review the show and follow us on patreon.com/campkaiju for additional videos, reviews, merchandise, and more. Other ways to get in touch are email at campkaiju@gmail.com, our website, campkaijupodcast.com, on Instagram, and our voicemail number, 612-470-2612. Camp Kaiju is recorded in Minneapolis, St. Paul with Mina's Mailbox music by Ben Cook Feltz. Thanks, friends, and until next time, stay campy. Camp Kaiju is brought to you by Zach Linder and the Zach Pack, powered by Coldwell Banker Realty. Whether you're looking for your dream home, a savvy investment property, or expert guidance in home rehab and flipping, the Zach Pack has you covered. Check the link in the show notes for more information.
Alucarda! We shall make a pact and seal it with our blood. We will make them pay.
Now call them! Call them! Call them!